And we're going to be talking about the calendar later in this presentation. So thank you, Sushila, for teeing it up.
And
Okay.
I just want to add too that the plant clinics at the Oahu Garden start on February 22nd and will be monthly until October. And I've submitted those events to the event calendar. So if you want to know more details, you can go to the event calendar. And if you want to sign up to be a volunteer, I'd be happy to have you.
And I have those slides featured in the presentation coming, Bev. So thank you. Okay, so again, some important dates for 2025. So kicking off our meeting today, thank you, and we have a full slate of things get going here. Not only will we go through the usual set of announcements and set of program activities, but Erica Heinlen will be joining us here, and from northeast Washington to talk with us regarding bryophytes, which are the mosses and the moss family. So, I think it's we of course consider mosses to be either a scourge, or the bane of our existence here in Western Washington. I was just amazed that we have a moss expert in the driest part of the state. So this is really a presentation I'm very eager to hear from. First off, of course, we need to celebrate some birthdays. And as we were talking before we began the meeting, Connie's birthday is on one of the very special days of this year. So this is truly a party. Connie is ready to party hard, right, on New Year's Eve. And of course, we're going to celebrate it as Connie Murren's birthday, which is why, as Connie noted to us, that's why everybody celebrates. Amy has a birthday and as well as Michaela on Christmas Day itself. So happy birthday to our three master gardeners this month. Okay. A quick reminder of who we are and why we gather. We gather here today as a foundation. This is the Master Gardener Foundation. We are a separate nonprofit corporation recognized by the IRS and recognized by the state of Washington. Our whole purpose is to support the program, is to support the Master Gardener program here in our two counties. And so all this information is on the website, and of course that there's always, we our membership in the foundation is necessitated. We have to be, we in our bylaws establish that membership is restricted to master gardeners in our two counties. And so this is as a nonprofit, we are staffed by the volunteers who are all master gardeners. A quick thank you to our 2025 board that will be retiring at the end of this year. And in particular, a shout out to Elizabeth and Lori Biddle and Karen Russo for their service over many years and our board. So thank you to all of them and us that have served in 2024. And welcome to our 2025 board. And Mike will be leading us here as president, and Gail is taking over as secretary from Lori, and the rest of the team is as presented here. So we look forward to an efficient and effective 2025 board process to be connected with directors from each region. Brenda will be leading us here in Pacific County. Lori, stepping back from her secretary role on the board, will also be leading Greater Grays Harbor, that region, and Peggy will be leading the Coastal Grays Harbor group. So congratulations to these folks because they will be key representatives from our regions to not just the foundation as vote bearing representatives to the board, but also as key liaisons to Wendy in the program in each region. So because of the huge size of our two counties here, this regional grouping really helps keep track of all the master gardener activities across the two counties. Wendy will be continuing as our sole coordinator here in 2025. And there are rumors, of course, regarding adding a support person for Wendy, but all of us, right, pledge our support for Wendy and in helping her be successful as our coordinator. And this is the key liaison back to the Master Gardener program. So very important that we recognize that that Wendy is doing a yeoman's job in keeping us aligned with the WSU program. Okay. Quick reminder for all the activities is that as a volunteer organization, as a service organization, it is imperative that we all step up and volunteer. And so I would let's make sure that as we enter into 2025, excuse me, we're thinking about carving out the time we need to ensure that we're adequately appropriating the volunteer time to what we do, and to the folks that we reach out to. So we exist solely on the shoulders of the volunteers that are contributing efforts. So thanks in advance for making sure that time and space is given to the organization. Okay, on to December to-dos from OSU. This is it. This, of course, all of these monthly reminders are published by the OSU Extension website under the Master Gardener calendar. As we think about December, it's a great time for managing our landscapes, particularly during the rains that will be coming. And it's a great opportunity to ensure that our landscapes are draining properly and draining appropriately. Great time also to make sure that we've got the bulbs that we are storing, that they are appropriately being stored, so that they're not rotting. And of course, the key comment right up front, if there's frost out there on the lawn, don't don't trod, don't trod unknowingly. By the way, the second bullet is an interesting one that Don Tapio always used to remind us of, that landscape plants often need watering during the wintertime. That there are times, such as we've had even this past week, in which the wind that we're receiving and the lack of precipitation means that we actually see some desiccation even on the natives. And so it's appropriate for us to be thinking about watering even during the winter months, which seems, so wrong, given that we are in our key rain collection times. Also, for pest, don't treat unless a problem is identified. This is a key reminder, of course, that we give to all of our clients that visit us at our plant clinics. There's a lot of mulching activity and a lot of encouragement from nurseries to use this time for your pruning and for your mulching. The mulch volcanoes, right? We want to avoid in terms of excess mulching, that would actually restrict restrict activities, restrict health of our, restrict health of the vegetation. Um, and of course, spruce trees, for spruce aphids, this is going to be this is a time in which you'll actually start seeing, some of these insects actually taking refuge in spruces and doing nasty damage on the tips. Terry, you have your hand up.
I did. When you were talking about the rain, watching for various things about moisture, I've noticed in my garden, I have pots that sit where they're exposed to rain and the drainage holes were plugged. So the pots filled up with water, which is, of course, not good for the roots of the plants that are in them. So I encourage everyone to look at their outdoor pots and make sure that they're draining properly.
Boy, I bet we could probably have a whole session in terms of, all of us that have outdoor containers in which the root mass becomes so congested there at the
Mhm.
bottom, it does end up, soaking up all the water, not allowing any drainage, and ultimately drowning the plants.
Mhm. Right.
I've often found that some of the pots, some of the containers that we procure from just a regular commercial nursery have insufficient holes to
Mm.
allow drainage, given all the precipitation that we have here. Certainly here in the peninsula, where we get 100 inches of rain right here, and a regular holes, in just a regular pot, sometimes doesn't cut it. Any other thoughts regarding water management during these months? Houseplants and indoor gardening, poinsettias, this is the time, of course, place in sunlight, fertilize with houseplant fertilizer to maintain the leaf color. monitoring for adequate water and fertilizer. There's just this is actually a very tricky time for the houseplants. Depending upon if they're too close to windows, they may actually have cold damage. If they're too close to it, to a heating source, they may have some dryness or even some burn. It's a tricky time. Terry, you have your hand up.
Again, yes. So Gail Dutton, who's now writing articles for the Senior Sunset Times on our behalf, wrote a really good article on care for poinsettias. It's in the December issue.
Gail, could you put that link into the chat?
Sure. It'll be the link for the Senior Sunset Times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Give me
I
time.
also
I'll have to
recently,
find it.
oh, sorry, Gail.
Oh, I'll have to time it.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I also recently did a podcast episode on seasonal plants. So it covers poinsettias as well as Christmas cactus and amaryllis.
Oh, excellent. Again, do you have the link for exactly that podcast? That'd be great to pop in.
Yeah, I can find it.
Yeah. Any other thoughts regarding houseplants during the winter? And I know that Bev and I really struggle with our houseplants here, and especially during the winter. So it's not a happy time for our houseplants. Okay. We are on to other announcements and other activities and so forth. I want to give time to Wendy to chat, and Wendy, are you on? I'm not sure I see you here. Yeah. Well, I'll have to cover here for her for a second. I want to get back to some announcements here, but on Wendy's behalf, it's very important that we continue to record our hours, not just this year, but obviously as we move into this next year. And remember, all of this can easily be tapped from the link, from the Give Pulse link that is right there in the upper right top of the pnwmg.org homepage. So hours need to be recorded. And in particular, as we were talking earlier, we're trying to emphasize that all of our master gardeners really need to be emphasizing use of the volunteer portal, which is the other red button on the home page in the upper right. And the volunteer portal will lead you to the very important calendar items that are linked right there into that volunteer portal. So the URL that is at the bottom of this screen is this is the detailed URL. The easiest way to get there is just go to the volunteer portal and you'll see how the calendar can be selected either in a whole entire monthly detail or into individual months with greater detail. And so here we have, the January 18th Greater Grays Harbor meeting being noted, study group on the 20th of January being noted. And as Bev noted here, we've got a pruning workshop coming up in Owaco on the 22nd, together with a plant clinic. So all of these items are listed in the calendar. Going to the calendar allows us and allows everyone easy access to where we can find opportunities for training and participation. Alina, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to also mention, since I don't think Wendy's joined us yet today, is that she and I work diligently to contact through multiple ways members who either had not entered their hours, had not entered enough hours, or had entered enough hours but hadn't responded to the email that she sent out with the link to recertify. And she even extended the deadline to December 5th. So we were doing phone calling, emailing, texting, and pretty much got everybody that wanted to recertified by December 5th. So great job in getting your hours in and going through this process that was a little bit different than we have done in the past because we had a website link. And we're moving forward.
Just to be clear, though, there's still value in us entering our hours even still for 2024, correct?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
I mean, you can definitely get your hours if you're trying to meet the 500 hour to be emeritus. But the deadline for recertifying was December 5th, and that's because Jennifer Marquis, I guess, they have a pushback on getting their records up to date and submitted. And so we needed to recertify so that we could give that information to Wendy to give it to Jennifer.
Very good. Elizabeth and Brenda, you both have your hands up.
And Brenda may have Brenda may have the same thing to say that I do, but still those hours do count for WSU toward hours that master gardeners are putting in each year. So December counts.
So
And entering every hour you do is a WSU requirement. It is not optional ever.
there you go. So and the key thing, Elizabeth, is you're emphasizing, right? This has value to WSU in demonstrating the service hours that we are providing, right, to the community.
Absolutely. And thank you for adding that, Brenda.
Gail asked about remaining 2024 hours rolling over to 2025. And of course, that is not allowed, right? Just to be clear.
It has to be a program coordinator decision.
Okay.
But it is not generally done.
Very good. Okay, so again, continue to emphasize to add the hours, and just it goes against the WSU tally and your own personal set of recognition. But certification is complete at this point. So Alina, really quickly, but do we have any tally in terms of how many folks are certified across the foundation?
You know what? I was more in charge of contacting people, and so Wendy would have that information.
Okay. Okay. We've gone through the calendar here. I want to note that also, and Aaron, you may have some comments here, is that there's still opportunities for the workshops that were in our September learning conference. Those workshops are still available, and I believe they're going to be available until, I guess, they've been extended to the end of the year. Is that correct?
December 1.
Yeah, it says December 1 here, but I believe that they actually extended it to the end of the year. Is that correct, Aaron?
I remember they extended it a little bit, but I don't think it was all the way to the end of the year.
Okay, so maybe it is over at this point.
It was, excuse me, it was December 7th was the extension,
Yeah.
but I've noticed they're on YouTube, so I don't know. You might be able to find them there. I past the December 7th, I still found them on YouTube.
So hunt them down. I mean, they really were some great sessions. So take advantage of the learning and take advantage of the information that's there. Very good. Any other announcements? Any other announcements from anyone here? Things that are happening, things we need to know, things we need to care about. Brenda's counting up 76 certified MGs have recertified in Give Pulse. That's pretty cool. Any other announcements as we get into December here? If not, I'm going to go ahead and introduce a very important person who's here with us today here. And and this is pretty exciting in terms of Erica, whom you are here and today and joining us here, because this is something that, you got to admit is that, those of us on the west side, right, have to deal with moss all year round on a lot of different kinds of mosses, and it's a common question we receive at our plant clinics all the time. How do I get rid of the moss? And of course, the nurseries are quick to sell us lots of, moss killing chemicals and other nutrients and so forth. And we're so eager to have you here to show us the brighter side of mosses, and the brighter side of how they all need to play out. I've given you that screen share privileges here. If you want to take it on.
Okay, there we go. I don't use the Zoom platform as much, so let me see.
So there should be a little on the Zoom toolbar.
Yep.
There should be a little green. Yep.
Do you see it?
Not yet. I'm just seeing you. So you need to pick a particular window.
I picked a window
and hit
and
share.
I'm going to share. I see
There
the
you
button.
go. Now it's coming. Secrets and strengths. Ooh, how alluring.
Oh, that's my window that I want to see. Let me bring that back over here. Okay, so you're still seeing my secrets and strength window?
We indeed are.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you, by the way, very much for joining us here today. And again, this is just, you've got to begin, by the way, with how you got into mosses being in one of the driest parts of the state.
Okay, will do. So it is fun to be here. I love talking about mosses. Hopefully, I won't go too long. I tried to pare down my talk, and then I started finding a bunch of new stuff that I wanted to add back in. So we'll see. You can cut me off at any time if you all need to go. But so my talk is Secrets and Strengths of the Moss World, and didn't get the right prompt there. So let me see here.
It says you need to resume your slideshow. So I think you may have accidentally.
So you're not seeing.
We're still seeing the opening slide.
Okay.
So that resume slideshow, there's a little in the upper left of that slide. It says there's a little thing you need to click here to resume. There you go. There you go. Now you're.
Okay. Now I'm there. I was just trying to figure out how to advance.
Just enter,
There we go.
There we go.
I'll just use those keys. Okay. So, the subtitle, more than you ever wanted to know about mosses. Which is probably very true today. So, I'm Erica Heinlen. I got my bachelor's degree at the University of Washington as a botany and zoology major way back when. I went to work for the Forest Service for a while as a seasonal botanist doing rare plant surveys, and went to a couple trainings about mosses and became very interested in them. So I went back and got my master's degree. There's not very many places to go to get a master's degree in mosses. So I went to the University of Alberta in Edmonton and studied under Dale Vitt there, who's a very well-known North American bryologist. And I studied bryophyte ecology, and he allowed me to study mosses in my area, which was great. So I got to come back home and study. So I'm in Tonasket, Washington, which is eastern Washington, north of Wenatchee. I'm 20 minutes from the Canadian border, and Tonasket sits in shrub steppe habitat. So we're very dry. We get like 12 inches of rain here every year. But my study site and the territory around here goes up in elevation very quickly. So within 30 miles of my house is Mount Bonaparte, which is 7,000 feet. So we have a lot of diversity in habitats and elevation, and we get all of that desert habitat from the south, and we get boreal habitat from the north. So it's a wonderful cross section of habitats here where I sit. So after my master's degree, I came back to Tonasket, continued to work for the Forest Service as a seasonal employee. I also stopped and did very part-time work while I was raising my children. And 3 years ago, I got the permanent full-time position as the zone botanist here. So my day job is working with vascular plants, and my supervisor allows me to do some work on mosses here and there as a part of my job, which is a blessing. So let's start at the very beginning. What is a moss? A moss is in the kingdom of plants. So it fits directly in that kingdom of plants. It has stems and leaves, chlorophyll, and the alternation of generations, which kind of defines what plants are. I also very often get asked, are mosses and lichens the same? And no, they're not. Lichens are a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae and other organisms. So they are classified under the kingdom of fungi. So they belong here. So two totally different organisms. They inhabit a lot of the same habitats. They have a lot of the same functions and ecological services, but they are very different organisms. So, so within the kingdom of plants, mosses come out right away. And they come out right away because they don't have any internal tissue for transporting water, sugar, nutrients. They don't have xylem, they don't have phloem, and that pulls them right out from all the rest of the plants in the plant kingdom. They do not have roots, so they absorb everything from the environment. They do have root-like structures, but those are just to hold them to the substrate and in helping water distribute through capillary action on the outside of the plants, but nothing goes internal to the plants in any sort of structure. Because they can only get their nutrients and their water from the environment, they stay small. There's no mechanisms, no pumps in there to make them any taller than the water allows them in their environments. So they're very small structured. But unlike vascular plants, they don't have a wilting point because they don't have any structure inside that will fail if they lose water. And most moss species can completely dry out, and then any number of days, months, years later can be wetted and rehydrate and become active again. So that is very unique for mosses. So the Bryophytes is the group, the overarching umbrella of non-vascular plants. And it's made up of 3 different groups: the mosses, the liverworts, and the hornworts. So the mosses have stems and leaves, usually spirally arranged, and they have a capsule that isn't a permanent structure, but it's long-lived, like weeks to months lived. On the other side of the page are the hornworts, and they have a thallus that grows. So it's not stems and leaves. It's just a mat of tissue. It is organized. And then their sporophytes are shown. That's where it gets the horn name, as the long spires that come up. And those, they need that moisture to produce their sporophytes. These grow in very wet habitats. I've never seen one in Eastern Washington, but I did see one in Olympia last spring, my first one. So those are hornworts. And liverworts I put in the middle because they have 2 growth forms. One is a leafy growth form like a moss, and the other is a thallus like a hornwort. But the liverworts have, in that picture, you see the white tubes with the little black, those capsules are very short-lived, like within a day, within a couple days, those go up, release the spores, and then die back. So some functional differences there, structural differences between the mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. So the structure of a moss can be broken down into two main parts, and this also ties into that alternation of generations, which all plants have, but it's harder to see in vascular plants, especially flowering plants. It's easier to see in like the fern, and I'll show another slide to go through that. But for structure, we have the leafy part is called the gametophyte. It's called the gametophyte because it produces gametes, the sexual structures that help in reproduction. So the gametophyte has the leaves and the shoots and the rhizoids. Those are the structures that make up the gametophyte. Once those gametes come together, they form a sporophyte. So the sporophyte is named that because it produces spores. And this includes the seta, which is that stalk that pushes the capsule up, and the capsule is what produces the spores. So mosses and liverworts and hornworts all produce spores and not seeds. So that's they're similar to ferns in that way. So the life cycle of a moss. If you start over on the right side with the gametophyte, the thing that you're all familiar with as the leafy parts of the moss, on that leafy part, there are two different structures, the antheridia, which produces sperm, and the archegonia, which holds the egg. And so these structures are in different places on the mosses, and all those, whether it's at the tip or along the edge, those all kind of tie into how they're, how you ID them. So you can see that these structures are on the outside of the moss. This requires water to happen because the sperm free swim through the moisture to get from the antheridia to the archegonia. So it's a limitation that mosses have, especially in dry environments, that process isn't going to happen very often. And mosses are designed to help that situation, but that is one of the things that limits them, is the need for water for sexual reproduction. But when that happens, the sperm meets the egg, that starts the sporophyte generation. So the moss itself, the green gametophyte, green tissue that we see, is haploid. It only has one set of chromosomes. So that's very different than how we think of all the things that we, all the other organisms that we see that have two sets of chromosomes. So mosses are 1N. So the part of the moss that is 2N, that has two sets of chromosome, is the sporophyte. So it grows up from the gametophyte. It is supported by the gametophyte, grows up, and within the capsule, then meiosis occurs, breaks into 1N spores, and then those spores are released. I haven't been keeping up, I think, on my advancing. So that is then the spores are released. They find the right substrate in the right conditions, and they form a protonemal mat on the surface of like filaments. And then from those filaments grows the leafy green gametophyte again, the moss that you see.
So,
So
Erica,
that's the alternation of generations.
So just to jump in, so both sexes, if you will, are present on the same plant?
That is one of the things. It can do all of those things. It can have male plants and female plants. They can be mixed. They can be different structures on the same strand. They can be different structures within the same thing. And so different mosses tackle that differently.
And I'm fascinated by the point in which you mentioned up earlier, is that as a non-vascular plant, right? I mean, they can dry out and then essentially be revitalized, right? With extra water. But isn't there some sort of there's got to be damage to the cell structure or something, right? Just from an excessive drying time.
They go through a chemical process which allows them to dry out without a lot of damage. And then when they're re-wetted, in about 20 minutes, they'll start to repair that damage, start photosynthesizing and repairing that damage, and then being able to grow
So,
once they repair.
so how do they die? I mean, you could have a moss that could go on for a long, long time, right?
A long, long time. Yeah. If I have killed dried specimens by wetting them and drying them too quickly over and over again. So they never get to that point where they're repairing themselves and replenishing their sugars. So if you wet it and then it dries within a half hour, it hasn't had enough time to revitalize itself. And if you do that too many times, then it won't be green anymore when you revitalize it anymore. So.
And then finally, on the picture you were showing, it certainly looks like those rhizoids look like roots, but you're saying they're not roots.
They're not roots. Nope. They just hold the moss to the substrate. And then because they're kind of capillary, they do draw moisture, but it's not internal, right? It's just, they're just using capillary action to kind of hold moisture in pockets like that because of the filamentous structure.
Very cool.
So there's always exceptions to the rules, right? So there is a genus of mosses that they don't have any leafy green structure. So they send their capsules up. They must have the gametes on the protonemal mat inside. This is usually growing on really decayed wood or within mineral soil or the top layer of humus right on the soil. And then it just sends up the capsule. So these are Buxbaumia, and in some books are called bugs on a stick is a common name because of just the short little capsules. So that's one of my favorites to find. They are difficult to find because rodents like to eat the capsules too. So they don't last very long. Okay, so spore dispersal. Mosses have a different ways to release those spores. The capsule structures are different. So on a very basic level, you have capsules that just split open and the spores pour out. So this is Andrea. It occurs on in rocky habitats, and it has this kind of rudimentary structure. You start to get a little more sophisticated and the capsules can have just holes. So this is like a salt shaker that just kind of shakes the spores out. It slows down the dispersal process so the spores all don't come out at once. So it gives them more opportunity to catch that good breeze to carry their spores away and just release their spores more slowly. So this is the group, the Polyctrium group has a capsule like this. You get even more sophisticated. You have capsules that have these peristome teeth. And the peristome teeth, so mosses are 1 cell thick. They're they're absorbing everything. They're 1 cell thick. So the capsule itself is thicker, but they're very receptive to water. And so these teeth, being so receptive to water, will change their shape based on the humidity. So this allows those teeth to go in and grab spores and bring them out. And so it slows down that process even more of allowing spores to be released and being able to catch a breeze and get a little further away from the mother plant. And then the most sophisticated system that a moss can use is actually using flies to distribute the spores. So this is a group of dung mosses. Splachnum is the group of mosses that this occurs on, and it occurs on dung, just like that common name says, either scat or sometimes bones of animals. And that decaying, the flies are attracted to the moss by pheromones that the mosses are producing, and the spores are sticky, so they stick to the flies, and then the flies will like poop, right? So they go to the next the next stack of scat, and they'll land on there and distribute the spores that way. So that's it's pretty sophisticated for something that we think of as a primitive sort of plant. So like I mentioned before, sex is difficult in mosses because it has that moisture requirement. So a lot of mosses have changed strategies and are more prone to produce gemmy or do some asexual reproduction than the sexual production. So this picture shows the Marcantia, which is a liverwort with these cups that have those little green discs in them, and those are gemmy. So it's all the tissue that is needed to make a new plant. So, and they're even in a structure, a splash cup, where a raindrop comes down, splashes those little discs out, and then they can start a new plant. There's no genetic recombination, so it's an exact copy of the mother plant. So it's like a clonal way to disperse. And so then on the other two pictures, you can see the different forms that gemmy can take. Then another way that mosses can do that is just to fragment. Like any piece of a moss can start a new plant, and some are designed to do this more easily. Like this is Dicranum torcum, and the leaf tips are just fragile. They break off really easy. One of the identifications for this is you can go up, lick your finger and rub it on the moss, and you have a bunch of leaf tips on your finger, and that any one of those leaf tips then becomes a gemmy that can produce a new plant. Okay, shifting to where do mosses grow? Bryophytes are generally more widely dispersed than vascular plants, meaning that there are fewer endemics. Spores are small, and if they get into the air column, they can go a really long ways. So studies show that mosses spores, most of the spores stay with very close to their parent plant, but that long range dispersal is also possible. So how do we know that they are dispersing a long ways? If you put double-sided sticky tape on airplane wings and expose it at 30,000 feet, you can catch moss spores on that tape. New islands that form in the ocean, one of the first colonizers are mosses. So those spores are getting there somehow, and these new islands, and those are the first things that start growing on islands. So we know the spores are getting there somehow. They are long range dispersal. And then there's this cool plant, Schistostega pineta. It's called golden goblin. I don't know. It's that glow that you're seeing is actually a root fluorescence. So if you shine a light on it, it glows back at you. And these occur on very large root rods. So newly exposed root rods of trees that have fallen over in very humid habitats. And you get this moss. So you have this very patchy distribution of habitats, and this moss, which is rare because the habitat is rare, starts growing on these root rods. So we know that those spores are getting around to establish on these new root rods. So those are all kind of indicators that the spores do get around. Some mosses must be better at this than others. So some mosses have a global distribution. So Bryum pseudotrichotrum is one of our very common, well, I find it in riparian areas. You could probably find it in just moist forest habitat. It grows on all 7 continents, which is an amazing feat for this moss to grow in so many different places. Brachythecium halotipedum only grows really in Western North America. So this is pretty much as endemic as we find a moss to be, is growing with this kind of Western North America. sort of distribution. And it's nothing like a vascular plant that only occurs on the top of the mountains in the Olympics, right? It's not that isolated. They have a broader distribution than that, but usually not globally. So it's interesting that those that it has those two different things. So factors such as spore size, location, air currents, and major weather events like windstorms, hurricanes, firestorms can affect the distance that spores can travel. Once the spores land, it has to be the appropriate habitat, whether it grows only on rocks or only on trees or only on a specific type of tree or on mineral soil. If it finds that habitat, then it can establish and grow. So they do have different growth requirements, the different species of mosses do. So when we think of moss distributions, there's lots of levels of different habitat requirements, right? And you think of habitats on a landscape scale. I have these beautiful pictures, so I'll just blow through them, but this is what Tonasket looks like, right? So this is sagebrush. You get up a little higher, start to get into a ponderosa pine. Even a little bit higher, you get Douglas fir coming in, still very dry forest habitat. A little higher, you have a mixed conifer where you start getting larch and subalpine fir. And then higher into subalpine habitat where you are Engelmann spruce and subalpine fir dominated, and then up into the alpine that gets above tree line. So this is kind of the cross section of habitats that I have in my area. And you can think of your area of the different habitats that you have in different elevational gradients. But within each of those kind of habitat bands, you have different habitat features within the forest type. So you can have rivers and streams or lakes and ponds. You have the upland habitat or cliffs or talus slopes. So these are what I call a mesohabitat. They're like in between micro and landscape, but they still, on a moss scale, these are very important because you have different suites of species in all of these different types of mesohabitats. And then within the mesohabitat, you have all the substrates that a moss can occur on, and that's a microhabitat. So you have wood, you have different types of wood, snags and stumps and logs, different types of soil, mineral, humus, or litter, different rock features, boulders or outcrops, different trees. You have the bark on the bole, you have branches. And then even in a water feature, you have the zones of the different hydric levels where, whether it's immersed or it's in the spray zone or if it's ephemeral. And then even if you look on this log, even within one microhabitat, there's different mosses that are growing on the top of the log as opposed to the side of the log and the bottom of the log, because they each have their microhabitat within the microhabitat. So the fine scale that you have to think of when you think of moss habitat, it just wanted to bring you down to, there's very specific places on a log that a certain species might have it, might find its home. So kind of shifting gears now to some of the importance of mosses. Why do we care? What can you guys know, having your little tool belt to convince your people or even to convince yourselves not to get rid of all the mosses? Why are they important? So the first one would be they are pioneer species. Like that island out in the ocean, they are the first things that can find that place and start growing. And you see these pioneer species on a riverbank. The bottom picture, Funaria hydrometrica, it loves the ashy soil after fire. So you'll find it in fire pits. And you'll also find this on mineral. And you probably have your nursery plants that have this as one of the kind of weedy nursery species. It's occurring on moist mineral habitat. And then you see the Grimmia on the right side of the screen where this is on a rock. So the rock was bare, and then these things can start growing and they form these tight cushions, and the cushions trap dust, and that makes a little bit of soil build up underneath it, and it keeps growing and getting bigger. And soon a vascular plant seed will fall in that and be able to take root. And so it's establishing that soil, and they're stabilizing soil that would otherwise wash away. So mosses are very important for soil health. I found this about a year and a half ago, this article. I'll just read these couple little blurbs. Mosses affect all major soil functions, increasing carbon sequestration, nutrient cycling, and the breakdown of organic matter. These processes are critical for sustaining life on Earth. And the modeling in this study showed that across the globe, mosses store 6.4 gigatons more carbon than soils without plant cover. So the cover on the soil is helping the soil underneath to have all of these ecological functions. Very important. It mentioned carbon sequestration. So like the northern peatlands, just reading this quote, contribute significantly to global carbon sequestration and storage of biomass, most of which derives from sphagnum peat mosses. So you can just see the extent of that Manitoba peatland and know how much carbon is stored in that habitat. And then there's some companies that have been working on engineering these moss mats, shown on the right. And their study showed that half a square meter, one of those moss panels, can absorb 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide. Now, in that article that I read, I didn't see how long did it take them to do that, but still, it's absorbing carbon dioxide from the air. So they're trying to develop these into filters and things like that for urban development. I have some slides later about that. Water regulations. So you get to enjoy. Oh, maybe I'm not seeing. Sorry, let me find my place here because I have a little quote. It's here.
Looks like there's a little video you want to play.
There we
right?
go. Yeah, there's a little video. So, like I said, mosses can absorb water and dry out completely. So this species, Centricia ruralis, occurs probably in your area in drier spots, but a lot in my area, and it dries out completely. It's black and crusty, and then it can absorb water really quickly, which this video is show. But I've been reading recently a book called Gathering Moss by Robin Wall Kimmerer. It's a wonderful read. I'm surprised it's taken me so long to get there. But she says this about absorbing water. The top shelves of my office are stacked with cartons of dry mosses, packed away as reference to one research project or another. Each time I take out a specimen, it must be wetted so that I can see its fine-scale features on which identification depends. I suppose I could just soak it in a petri dish for a few minutes. But even after all these years, I still delight in the ritual of adding water drop by drop and watching them with the microscope as the shoots revive. I think of it as a small act of homage to a remarkable marriage between moss and water. The moss and the water seem to have a magnetic attraction for each other. I add a drop of water to the tip of the dry shoot, and it rushes among the moss leaves like a flash down a narrow canyon. Dry, contorted leaves unfurl. All is light and movement as the drop follows every passageway and penetrates every little space, swelling beneath the convex leaves and bowing them outward. So hopefully this will play so you can watch this process.
And how long is this the time it takes to make that change?
It's the whole video is a minute, so it's real time. So it's about probably 45 seconds from when the water is added.
There's got to be a capacity though, a capacity limit to this, right? I mean, there's only so much water a moss gamete can absorb.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let me see here. There we go. So the water, mosses absorb really quickly, and then it holds the water for as long as it can. And it has specialized cells and all of the little micro spaces in between the mosses and the cushions all act to help to preserve that water for as long as they can. So just wanted to show you, sphagnum can hold 20 times its weight in water. And it's because of these cells. So on the right side of the screen, the cell is outlined in the green. That's where the chloroplasts are, so that the internal part of the cell is all water storage capacity. So they're just really, really cool designs. And that is helping those mosses to hold on to water as long as possible. Now, if we think of how mosses interact with their environment, there's a few things here. So they provide shelter for microfauna, and microfauna being really small creatures. So if we think of a forest and all the creatures that are living underneath the canopy, the same can be said of mosses being a forest for all these microscopic creatures. So there was a study in 1971 by a Japanese man on Mount Fuji, and he found that the largest number of these small creatures occurred in mosses as opposed to other types of substrate. And another quote I found from Robin Walkimmerer in this book last night was, the collection from a Bernese funnel, which is they took some moss and put it in this funnel, and they expose it to a heat source, which makes all of the critters scurry out, and then they fall in the funnel to this little vial at the bottom, and then they can count them. So the collection from a Bernese funnel might typically produce the following results. 1 gram of moss from the forest floor, a piece about the size of a muffin, would harbor 150,000 protozoa, 132,000 tardigrades, 3,000 springtails, 800 rotifers, 500 nematodes, 400 mites, and 200 fly larvae. These numbers tell us something about the astounding quantity of life in a handful of moss. And I just found that fantastic. It's awesome. And when you are looking at these under the microscope, and then when you take pieces off and put them under the compound scope, you do see little swimmy things all around in the water of the leaves that you've dissected. So other fauna that need the mosses to survive because they're providing safe sites and habitat, moisture and temperature regulation. In this case, food and food locations. There's the salamander in Costa Rica who's living in the moss mats, and it has an average range of those 2 degrees, 17 to 18 degrees Celsius. So the moss is helping the temperature regulation for the salamander. Nesting material, birds use mosses in their nests. There's a study on the East Coast where 12 bird nests revealed 65 different species of bryophytes within them. This little guy is so cute, endangered spotted turtles, again on the East Coast, but living in peatlands, and it's the temperature regulation of the peat, the insulation that they provide, where it's negative 35 degrees Celsius outside. Inside the moss, it's -2 Celsius, and so they can exist there. So it's providing those safe sites, the moisture and temperature, providing for overwintering. This guy has adapted to have little tubercles that look like moss, so he's camouflaged in his mossy habitat. So that's all cool. If mosses can provide food, they're generally not regarded as really nutritious in general, but of course there's always some exceptions. Slugs and snails and small rodents eat the mosses for nutrition. So here's a Eulota phylantha. All you're seeing there are the little midribs of the leaves called the costa left, and the rest of the lamina part of the leaf are gone. These gemmy that we saw earlier, these are generally more nutritious than moss leaves themselves. So the little critters will go after the gemmy, and capsules have that spore, and those are just generally more digestible and more nutritious. So major component of weevil diets in the Arctic. Bryophytes create and collect chemicals, good and bad. So here's a bog lemming. They actually get arachidonic acid from the mosses, which has a low melting point. So it actually might help the little rodents' feet from freezing on the frozen tundra. So, but on the bad side of things, like the high levels of radiation from Chernobyl were accumulated in the mosses and then got into the food chain that way. So every good feature can have its dark side. Human uses, we use mosses for lots of different ways, packing material, potting soil, fuel. You see the peat bricks here in Ireland. Survival. So if you ever have a chance, you can go to this historical website, Survivopedia, sorry. They have an article on mosses. Half of the article is untrue, like they just have their facts wrong. And most of the ways that mosses can help you to survive are their water holding capacity. So you can squeeze the mosses free of their water and drink that if you're in a survival situation. Bandages. So the sphagnum moss also has antiseptic properties. Bacteria doesn't grow there very well. So it has been used in bandages during World War I. Here's the quote on the top of the box there. It says, sphagnum moss absorbs 20.4 times its own weight. Cotton absorbs from 6 to 8 times its own weight. Like other forms of sea plants, little misnomer there, but sphagnum moss contains the antiseptic properties of iodine. So you can use it to cover your wound, and that helps absorb and fight bacteria as well. Mosses have been used in pollution monitoring, and this is in several different ways. Just the species change can show you the detection of pollutants in the air. So some species are very sensitive to pollutants and they'll die out, and others are good at handling those. And so when you see that species composition change in an urban environment, People have collected baggies of moss, like putting in like nylons and setting them in urban areas, and they collect the pollutants, and then you can see what pollutants are in the air. And then you can do that in a more natural way too, by just collecting the mosses that are growing on the trees in the urban areas. So there was this was maybe 15 years ago. They analyzed moss collections in Portland and found point sources of cadmium pollution from the stained glass factories in Portland. And they've replicated this to show in South Seattle to show the air pollution in that area. So they used community members to collect mosses. They sent them away for analysis, but it's showing that the pollution is worse in poorer neighborhoods because of the factories and stuff. And so it can be used as a tool that way to show where the pollution is heaviest. There's been lots of research trying to isolate those genes that allow desiccation for commercial farming applications. When I was in grad school, they were trying to isolate the genes so that they could put them in tomatoes, because wouldn't it be great to have a tomato that could withstand was more drought tolerant? They've used sphagnum, trying to figure out how to use them in diapers. And then different chemicals. Liverworts are good on their chemicals. Some of the identifying things that you can do are some species taste peppery. So that's one of the ways you can identify it. But there's this radula has a marijuana-like chemical in it, and it's actually better at reducing inflammation than marijuana. So there might be some pharmaceutical application there. Structurally, they have great water holding capacity, right? So this Mercantia polymorpha, these Japanese researchers saw that they were holding the water like that in a droplet, so they made a pipette with that structure. I want some of these pipettes. I don't have any use for a pipette, but I think they're cool. Again, here's these moss mats. So using them as filters to absorb carbon dioxide. This is just a prototype. I don't think these are in production yet. I just found this like a year and a half ago, but this company wants to produce these filters for like bus stops in Europe, that sort of thing. So they're absorbing carbon dioxide, they're filtering dust particles, and they're cooling the air around them. So they're nice to stand by. And I found this yesterday. This popped up on my Facebook feed. So I'll just read this out to you. The concept of bioreceptive concrete, pioneered by this Dutch startup, is indeed an innovative approach to urban green species. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Uke Balij, and his team have developed a type of concrete that supports the growth of moss without harming the underlying structure. This moss has rhizoids instead of roots, which means it adheres to the concrete but does not penetrate it, making it non-invasive and ideal for urban environments. The moss not only beautifies concrete structures, but also provides significant environmental benefits, converting CO2 into oxygen, absorbing pollutants from air and water, and helping the cool buildings through evapotranspiration. Additionally, moss-covered surfaces require minimal maintenance and are graffiti resistant, which can be a big advantage for maintenance managers. The solution can be applied to existing structures as well as in new builds, allowing cities to integrate more green spaces into their infrastructure. So I thought that was pretty cool and timely that it came up on my feed yesterday. So you're welcome.
I'm just checking. I put their website onto into the chat, and by the way, they're looking for investors. This is your opportunity, Erica.
Right. Right on. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit to more conservation, what do we know about the moss species in Washington State? We had a wonderful lady, Judy Harpel. I don't know, maybe some of you knew her. She lived in the Vancouver area. But she was our moss guru. and she passed away a few years ago, and she was making a baseline list of mosses in Washington state. And she was doing a very intensive checklist where she would actually check vouchers to make sure that the species names were correct. And there were 2 vouchers for each species in Washington. She passed away before she finished that list, and all of her collections and stuff have gone to the California, the university system. And I'm sure that it will be made available at some point, but I'm going to take them a while to curate it all. So in the meantime, we don't have a list of species of mosses in Washington. So Walter Ferdig, who's now at WSU, he was our state botanist with the DNR, or Washington Natural Heritage Program. And me and some others are trying just to use herbarium specimens to create a list, a starting point list of mosses in Washington. I did this approach in 2021 for liverworts and hornworts, and found 200 taxa of liverworts in the state, whereas Judy, she told me verbally that she thinks there are about 750 species of mosses in the state of Washington. 4 species of hornworts based on my research. The problem with my list of liverworts, it's highly problematic because most of the records of liverworts from Washington state are pre-1950. So all of the names have changed basically based on, all the changes in knowing the taxonomy. So using the list that's using specimen data that's that old just makes the whole list problematic. But we're not collecting like the old time collectors did, right? Like in the early 1900s, they just went out on expeditions and collected a bunch of things and sent them to herbaria everywhere. We don't do that these days. So we have very ancient data and incomplete data for all of the groups of bryophytes. So do we have any rare mosses? We don't really know. Judy put together a list in 1996 of things that she considered rare, just based on her personal knowledge. And she had a little group around her that fed into that, but there haven't been any updates since then. And I know things that are on that list that I have commonly in Eastern Washington, but we just didn't know that in 1996. So there's a lot of need for updating that list and creating a rare list for hornworts and liverworts. And these colleagues and I are trying to get there, but it's like a hobby that we don't get to very often because our day jobs are full, right? So, but it is very difficult when you find something that is cool and you're like, is this new to Washington? You don't know because we don't have a list. So that's as a collector, it's we need to get to a place where we have a list of all the mosses and then can develop good lists of rare species so we can serve them. So I did my master's in the early 2000s, and my master's was with this title, Patterns of Rarity in Mosses of the Okanagan Highlands of Washington State, an Emerging Coarse Filter Approach to Moss Conservation. So I tried to figure out, based on all of my collections, I had like 4,000 identifications in my area, and kind of whittled those down to things that, happened in my area commonly versus rarely, 1 or 2 sightings of mosses, and where did those rare things occur. And it really showed that unique habitats are holding unique species. Like a general upland always has kind of the same suite of species. But if you get to a rare, unique habitat, that is holding a different set of species, and those then are rare. So then if you're protecting unique habitats on the landscape, you're generally conserving the diversity of that area. So I found some of the, just real quick, some of the unique habitats and species I found. Undeveloped sagebrush has this little species, dryland waterfalls, boreal streams and fens, different peatlands, have different species. So that was my work. So coming more to what you guys want to know. Thank you for sticking with me.
No,
I'm getting to the end here.
Don't cut us short. This is fascinating stuff, Erica. We mean this sincerely. And if you've been following in the chat, right, there's been some great questions and stuff coming in. So we have a lot. We have a lot to we're entranced.
Okay, good. Frequently asked question: the moss is killing my lawn. The answer to this is no. The moss is not killing your lawn. You're providing better moss habitat than lawn habitat. So mosses, they don't produce chemicals. They're not parasitic. They don't compete in those ways. They just occur where the conditions are right. So you have moss in your lawn. It's probably extra wet, probably, maybe compacted soil or something that's not allowing the grass to grow well. Grass, when it's healthy, is going to outcompete the moss. But when you are providing moss habitat, it'll grow there. So if you want a better lawn, you need to provide more light, use shade-tolerant grass species, aerate the ground to reduce compaction, and then limit the watering a little bit, which for you guys maybe not is that possible because it's coming as rainfall, but those are the kind of things. Or you can just embrace the moss and let it grow because it's low maintenance. And if you have an eye for it, it's beautiful. So this was an interesting thing. This is one of the things I looked up recently. The moss is hurting my roof. Now, before last week, my presentation said yes, but I found more information. It depends, right? That's always the answer. It depends. In some cases, mosses may affect the integrity of your roof. It is thought that the water holding capacity of mosses could increase weathering and may produce more freeze-thaw action on your roof tiles or shingles, or dam up water and divert it underneath the tiles. But this may depend on your climate and your roof material. But people who spend time on roofs, roofers, and people who have actually studied mosses on roofs are not seeing damage underneath the moss clumps. Actually, they are finding that the roof integrity under the tile seems better than the tiles that have been in the sun. And it's actually probably more damaging to clean off the moss and use the harsh chemicals on your roof than it is to leave the moss in situ. So there's this whole group that I found that is for green roof construction, claiming much like these cement tiles that I showed you earlier, the same sort of things. They're regulating rainwater, slowing the runoff, increasing biodiversity in the urban environment, creating some insulation, and improving air quality by producing oxygen and trapping carbon dioxide and pollution, and a sound dampening effect from traffic or other noises. So if we get over the idea that the moss on your roof is a sign that you're lazy and that you don't want to get up there and clean it off, that it's hurting your roof, it's actually probably providing more benefit than it is harm. So that's my spiel. But if you're not convinced that you want to keep your mossy roof, there's lots of instructions online on how to clean that, which mostly is like scraping it off and then applying some chemicals that will prevent the moss from growing back. And some of these chemicals are things with high levels of iron, or detergents, vinegar solutions, bleach solutions have also worked. I read an article also recently about plant herbicides, which don't generally work to eliminate mosses. So mosses are going to grow where they can grow. And if you, like in your lawn, if you apply plant herbicide, to get rid of your dandelions. You might also kill some of the bigger mosses, but that's probably going to leave some bare soil underneath, which the weedier species will come into. So the article that I read showed species composition change, but not an elimination of mosses based on the plant herbicide. And it was more in a forest setting where they were worried about diversity, but I think the same thing applies for your lawns. So I just wanted to show some resources. When I'm IDing things, I use Elva Lawton's 1971 Moss Flora of Pacific Northwest. We don't have anything better. Most of the names have changed. Well, not most. A lot of the names have changed, but it's still the best resource that we have. So I ID in there, and then I usually cross-check with the Flora of North America because the taxonomy has changed a lot, and figure out what the new name is and if there's any other things that are related. And those are volumes 27 and 28 cover the mosses. There is going to be a volume for liverworts. I'm not sure where that is in production, but I think a lot of those keys can be found online. This book, Gathering Moss, is the one that I've been reading. It's a delightful read. It takes you into the deep science, but through a very, very gentle storytelling sort of way. Robin Welcomer also wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a very well-known book about indigenous kind of cultural uses of things and supporting indigenous habits and stuff like that. Common mosses of Western Oregon and Washington would be very applicable to your area. It has very good pictures. It can't be found. You have to go directly. You do a Google search for that one and go directly to the manufacturer, because it's not sold on like Amazon or other booksellers. And then I got a lot of the information about the roofs and stuff from this website by Janice Gleim, the Bryophyte ecology book. It is like everything that you might ever need to know in minute detail about mosses, but it's got great pictures, and it's like a great little resource. There's lots of other things, but these were the top ones that are on my mind right now. And with that, we'll go to questions. And I haven't been looking at the chat, too many screens and things, so
Erica, this is really exciting here, that's for sure. And so let's just go back with some of the earliest questions. Connie, you were asking a question about forest fires, and what does that do to mosses? Does that completely eliminate them, completely kill them?
Yeah, I started a study about that way back in the early 2000s, and then I had kids, and it didn't get finished. But what I saw was that, yeah, mosses were pretty much not apparent right after the fire. It was a place that I had surveyed for my master's degree, and then a fire came through. So I had baseline data of these sites. And when I went back the year after the fire, species number, cover, they were all way down. But even like 3 years after the fire, there were the starts of moss colonies where they had been before. So there was a certain number of things that were able to survive. So even small fragments that are left behind after a fire can then reestablish.
I was actually wondering if the spores would survive.
Possibly, right? Like, I didn't study that. I don't know if anybody's gotten that detailed in studying survival of spores to, heat or flame exposure versus, the moss itself. But then you also get that suite of colonizer species that come in after fire, like the Funaria that loves the ashy soils, and the Marcantia, also the liverwort, the thallus liverwort grows really well in ashy soils. You get that cover first, and then the diversity starts coming back.
Questions and comments. Randy's comment about the Oregon State apparently has a list of mosses, and wondering if that would be a good start for baseline work in terms of
Yeah,
their
it would
2019.
definitely be something that we would cross-reference to see, if we're not finding records of things that Oregon has, that those might be things to go search out. And we do have a few people from Oregon that have done a lot of field work in Washington. So they will also become good references for us for the species list.
Good question here from Janet. Is there a genetic testing option to identify these things? These are pretty simply structured organisms, right?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. They probably can do it in the lab. I don't know if we have the database of DNA on mosses well established enough to do like eDNA like they do for fish and frogs and stuff in waterways, but probably not that developed yet. Yeah, it would be great to have like a little handheld device that you could go up and see what's the name of this thing. But yeah, we don't have any of that yet.
Kathleen's put this list at Michigan Tech. Seems to have a downloadable book.
Yeah, that's that Bryophyte ecology book by Janice Gleim that I referenced.
I see. Oh, I see it. Yes, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Are you surprised that it's not as well studied? I guess is the fact that it's especially significant. We're talking one of the premier moss expert in the state of Washington right now. So and yet if they're so prevalent, right? They're so prevalent worldwide, and so, is it why hasn't more study been given to them?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of interest and funding, and yeah, somebody just needs to go forth and be that person. We're losing. There was the people who were prominent in the moss world in the 90s and 2000s, are now either passed away or retired, and there hasn't been support at universities to kind of replace those people, right? So it's kind of been a loss, like the Wilf Schoolfields at UBC and the Dale Vitts that have now retired. Like there isn't. Yeah, we need more people doing more things because there are basic things that we don't know.
It's up to you to fill the void, Erica.
Yeah.
Hey, Val, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your questions particularly, because it seems like you're asking specifically regarding liverwort.
I have a tremendous colony of liverwort in 2 of my raised beds, and I think it's because I water those too much. And I learned a long time ago, or someone told me who was supposed to know, do liverwort steal nutrients from the soil?
They're going to take anything that's already water soluble in their vicinity, right? Like, but they don't have a vascular system that's taking anything from deeper within the soil than just right on top that's already kind of water available, right? Like you water it, the nutrients go into the water and it's right there. So they're not stealing from the roots of the plants.
That's kind of what I assumed after I heard your talk, and I've read Dr. Kimmerer's book, because they don't have a vascular system. So that's a great relief. Yeah, because if anyone wants to see liverworts, come to my raised beds, and they're beautifully available. So they're not easy to get rid of, obviously, because the spore are so prolific. But is it helpful to keep kind of peeling them off the surface of the soil? And I'm going to stop watering those beds so much also.
Yeah. They probably aren't doing a lot of damage. I would think if you like peeled back where you needed to put your plant, whether it's vegetables or your flower, so you have to dig your hole to put them in there. But I think if it grows back over where that plant has, where you disturb that soil, I don't think that's going to disturb the plant that you have in there. It might help with water relations, even like it's going to prevent evaporation if that's, unless you want more evaporation, then you might want to remove some of that liverwort to get more water cycling, because it is going to kind of trap some of that moisture in the soil.
Thank you very much. I've just loved this presentation.
Oh,
so
good. I'm a total moss nerd, so I'm glad to hear that other people like to hear about it.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments? I've put your contact information in the chat there.
You bet.
Because obviously you are this is a pretty unique resource as what we're finding here. It's amazing. Questions or comments for Erica? So clearly there's a lot to celebrate here, and
yeah.
And by the way, this is from a WSU perspective, by the way, we've really been encouraging, and we as master gardeners here in Southwest Washington are really encouraging our clients to be using more COIR, as opposed to peat moss. Noting that the peat moss is naturally acidic, right? And and that we don't need any more acid in our Western Washington soils. And then, of course, as you're digging up a 1,000-year-old peat bog, right? To make that peat moss.
Yeah.
So WSU is very much behind coconut husk wire.
Nice.
I have a question. Are there any moss aficionado groups in the Pacific Northwest? Any groups of people that get together and grow moss gardens, for instance?
What bars do moss nerds hang out in, Erica?
Yeah, I don't know. It might be a good Google search. I know that Evergreen College has Professor Lalita, can't think of her last name, but she could be found pretty easily, I think. She teaches some moss ecology classes, so there might be like a little group around Olympia in that area.
Gail says there's a Facebook group.
Yeah. Strangely, like I went and gave a presentation over in Olympia to their Native Plant Society last March. And so I stayed at a hotel and I went for a walk at one of the parks there. And I was finding mosses. It was really cool. I found my first hornwort. I was super excited. And so I just collected a couple things and I brought them back and ID'd them and stuff. But then I looked at the records and like there was no hornwort record for Thurston County in the state of Washington. I was like, what in the world? Like there are urban areas haven't really been that explored. And like Plagionaeum medium, which is a really common species, no record of that in Thurston County. So yeah, we just need more people to explore and to be able to ID.
Rhonda, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question or kind of a statement. Excuse me. We have witnessed here at my home in Montesano a number of times in the past couple of years where the crows will get on my roof and they'll peel and pick off, I would say, a fairly substantial clump of moss with a very blackened base. And they peel them off and then they go to the skylights and they drop them on the skylights repeatedly. They pick them up and drop them, pick them up and drop them. And we were trying to figure out, are they eating critters that are within those clumps of moss? What is it a crow is getting?
That
Any
would be my
idea?
best guess too, would be getting the invertebrates out of it
Okay.
to eat.
It's pretty
I don't-
fascinating to watch from inside the house,
Yeah.
looking up and watching them, because we thought they were trying to get our attention at first, or maybe they could see in, but after a while it was real apparent that it was with these little larger clumps that we either hadn't gotten to or hadn't peeled off in and around the base of the skylights. And they make a pretty big show of it. Kind of
Interesting.
cool.
Either that or it's some sort of, mating ritual, like they're trying to impress each other or something.
Well, that maybe so, because
Look
they
at
do
my
all
moss
kinds
clump.
they do funny stuff like that for sure. But
Yeah.
with the mosses, it's been really interesting to watch.
That's
And
Great presentation.
that really
Thank
was
you.
a strong takeaway for me, Erica. I mean, the volume of microfauna, right? That exist inside of moss is just, that's stupendous.
Yeah. Yeah. And diversity we probably don't even understand, right? Like that Japanese article had 75 species, but there's probably dozens of species we haven't even identified yet, right? Haven't even found, new to science, because of the numbers that are occurring and how little they're studied.
Other questions, other comments here for Erica? This has really been rich, Erica, and we incredibly thank you for your time and obviously for your persistence in the research, because obviously it's clearly that this is understudied, and
Yeah.
as certainly as people who approach us in our plant clinics, they're clearly they
You
clearly
okay?
they clearly see mosses as a foe, right? They clearly see mosses as a foe to be controlled.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So thank you for your time and letting me do this. I'm going into my winter season, so I have, less field work and stuff to do. So now I can zero in on the moss list and kind of identify the things that I collected this summer. It's a good segue into my winter work, and I'm excited. So
Thank you so very much for joining us here.
all right.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to it, just closing up in here, folks, I want to thank everybody for participating here today. Sharon, I want to do a quick check with you here. Is that you're interested in it, in continuing our discussion regarding bylaws, correct?
Yes.
Very good. So I'm going to go